Okay, welcome to the October meeting of the FileMaker Pro user group. We're glad to have everybody here. We're at the Harmonic Data Treehouse conference room. Thank you, Harmonic Data, for letting us be here today. I'm Taylor Sharp. Greg Price and I are your chapter co-coordinators, and we're glad to have everybody here today. So I'm going to start off with announcements for probably biggest thing that's happening this month that I know of is the Pause on Air conference in Georgia, which if you haven't already signed up for is sold out. So, but for those of you going, who else, anybody here going? You're going, I'm going, anyway, there are a couple of people doing. Of course, we're hoping by next year, maybe Claris will actually have the Engage conference. So anybody heard anything? Are we going back to Nashville? Anybody know anything? Any insider info? Yeah, I know. Okay, so.
Nashville's still there.
So anyway, who knows? Maybe we'll. Yeah, the second time when they canceled, I told them, well, I don't know why you're canceling, but if you want to come to Texas, you know, we got a JW here, you know, down the hill country, you know, that'll work. But anyway, so anything else happening in the world of FileMaker? We got 19.5 4 is out. So hopefully I haven't been having problems with updates. And if you're on 19.4, particularly if you're on server, you probably want to upgrade. There's a couple little bugs in there that are kind of nasty that 19.5 fixes. Actually, officially, the 19.4 to 19.5 version update fixes 400 bugs. So if that's not good enough to give you a reason to upgrade, that's a good reason to do it. So anyway, 19.4 is not what I consider overly stable. So anyway, it works, but you can run into, you know, issues. So 19.5 seems to be very rock solid, stable, and having minimal problems. Also, it seems to be having less issues for those of you on the Ubuntu Linux side of things. So good news there. So any other Claris news out there? Everybody updated on their FileMaker certifications? I know they're still doing those, you know, okay. If one of you do get the bug to do the upgrade, you know, there are various materials out there, but I've got some stuff that can help too if you do get the bug to go for it. So get in touch with me. I've helped coach people along in getting certified. We certainly encourage everyone to get certified. It kind of is a way of giving a little professional standing to assure you know what you're doing. I don't know that most of our customers know what it is, but within the FileMaker community, we certainly recognize the professionalism of getting certified. So anyway, I certainly encourage that. So it's also, if you haven't taken it, it's not an easy test. So, you know, I went on it for my first time, cold turkey. I almost didn't make statistical guessing. Don't go in cold. So anyway, but it is a doable test that it takes some study and also understand the test is very much about figuring out what you know or don't know about things. So it's a lot about intricacies. So what you think is the answer when you first read through things almost never is. So it's one of those things you read through it, answer is A. Now you go through it again and figure out why A is not really the answer because it's not always true or something. So anyway, once you get the philosophy of how it's done, it actually it's a lot easier. Okay. Well, today we have Heather McCue with us. Heather's a longtime friend and been in the FileMaker community. She's done everything from our developer conference presentations. She's done a lot of FMPUG presentations. She's probably most prominently known nationally for her experience in HIPAA and computer compliance. For those that are in the medical field, she is nationally known for that. And lots of people go to her for those kind of things, but she's here today on a little bit different topic for us. So fun to actually hear from a different aspect of the Heather McCue side of things. I always think she's a lot of fun because she has an Irish bar. So, but anyway, so anyway,
really good bar.
Without further ado, let's get Heather up here.
See your presentation. I'll turn my mic
Let's
off.
see if you see the, oh, not the right view. Hang on. Try that. All right, so that's the screen that you're seeing. Let's see if I can do the right thing and if it ends up on the right screen. Yes. Woo-hoo! Yay! Yes.
Your screen is what's being shared in Central though.
Yeah, so they're seeing you.
Oh, wrong screen. Okay, so. Mhm. Okay, so grab this guy, move it. Here. Didn't quite make it because it's so big over there.
The one on the bottom is what the other people are seeing.
Yeah.
You need to change the screen that you're sharing, since you changed the.
Since changing that, yeah, okay, right. I see what you're saying. Okay, hang on. Over here, new share, desktop 2. All right, let's try that. There we go. That looks better. All right. Can everyone see the screen and not the keynote?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. All right. I will, if I can get this, do you know how to collapse that up?
Usually you click on it. And just,
See, I have a cursor here.
where's your mouse?
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead anyway. We'll not worry about that. Welcome, and thank you for your patience. We're getting a late start. I will try to move it along. So our topic today is transitioning to UX design, which I think is a mindset shift for FileMaker developers. And having been one of those for as long as I have, and having spent the better part of the last year making that transition to UX, I speak with some experience on what's needed. All right, so why am I delivering this presentation, this particular topic? Because I have decades of FileMaker experience, and more recently, I added a UX certification to my 30 years of other stuff, right? So I spent 6 months taking evening courses with SMU and lots of different courses and group projects and everything from beginning all the way to making sales pitches for a product. So that was a lot of fun and very interesting, and I'm excited to share some of that with you. I have a lot to cover, so I may talk real fast, but I'm always available to talk after and explain anything. And I'll be sharing the presentation, and of course, this is being recorded. All right, let's move on. Okay, so what is UX and why do we care? To answer that, I'm going to start with a definition that I think sums it up: a human need, well-defined and elegantly met. Brian Sullivan is an author of a couple UX books, and he's one of the instructors at SMU. And I think that sums it up. That doesn't actually tell you anything specific, though, about what it is and what it does. Before we move on, we do need to make sure that we're on the same page about what design itself is. So what do you think design is? How would you define design? Anyone?
Presumably within the computer world?
I didn't say that.
No, she.
I said, what do you think is design?
Logically, or composition laid out in a logical manner to create the best functionality.
And how would you define composition?
Composition is the act of arranging.
That was a rhetorical question. That's okay then. So noted expert Peter Denning says, design is a process where we create and shape artifacts that solve problems. Or put more simply, to design is to solve problems. That's why we design. We're solving problems. That's why we're FileMaker developers. We enjoy solving problems, fixing things. Next question, what is design thinking? Design thinking is a discipline that uses the designer's sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically feasible. So that is design thinking. Now, because I don't seem to have a cursor, I don't have access to the rest of my notes.
Your mouse was on that screen just a second ago.
Bill, or someone faster, could you run to my desk and get my mouse? Because this isn't working. Okay. Next question. I'll try to remember what I was going to say. I've got some quotes from Tim Brown. He's a noted expert in the field. And I hate presentations where somebody reads every word that's on the screen. So I'm going to let you read because some of these are a little long. And but our next question is going to be, what is human-centered design? And the answer to that is lower on my screen here, so apologize. Basically, human-centered design is what it sounds like. It is designing for people, not for business solutions, but for the people that use those business solutions. So we need to get away from, for example, using phrases like, well, the customer needs this. The customer wants that. Well, if the customer is a corporation and there's more than one person there who's going to use this system, then it really isn't about what does the customer corporately want, but UX and human-centered design is all about what do the users need, and not what the users want, what the users need. And any of you who've been developing for a while understand that one, right? So that is human-centered design. Let's see if this will give me access here. Ah. All right, it clicked, but I cannot get a mouse. Oh, whoa, I saw it.
It's on the big screen.
Okay, and going, there we go. Phew. Thank you. When my mother calls and asks for tech advice, I ignore her. Okay, the term that Brown, Donald Norman, and others use for empathy-based approach is called human-centered design, or HCD. I will warn you, there are a lot of words that you may not be familiar with that I'm going to throw out here as though you know what I'm talking about. Some of them I will explain, and others don't matter that much. They're just part of my new lingo. And I'm happy to answer questions later. So basically, our solutions should be designed to reflect the user's needs, again, not the corporately. And finally, the reason that we care is because design-centric firms outperform the market. And if you want to see the proof, I could dig it up for you, but trust me on that one. Okay. Okay, here we go. I think I'm one step ahead of it. All right, so design thinking principles. And I realize this is an old magazine cover from, I believe, 2015, but it looks good and it's about design thinking. So the principles behind design thinking that you need to keep in mind are pretty simple. Decisions should be based in large part on the knowledge that's gained and problems identified as a result of your user research. And that's a term that we don't use much, if ever, as FileMaker developers, user research. So we'll be talking about that a bit more. Attempting to learn about users from non-users should be avoided. So we have one customer, for example, where we deal with one, admin level decision makers, but we build things for thousands of users out in the field. And that's not the way it works with UX. You would want to be interacting with the actual people who are going to be using your solution. And next, you're not your user. You are not your user, period. We'll be coming back to that one later. And unhappy users lead to unsatisfied customers. Even if you meet the requirements and the needs that they gave you corporately, if the users are not happy, they will find a way for that to trickle back up to you or down to you, depending on your relationship. This is the holy trinity of UX, according to the SMU UX department. Okay. And the reason for that is because each one has their own user focus mantra. Mantra's the best I can come up with, because it's not something you see on their labels. And by the way, they don't mean that for employees. I'm sorry, I didn't say that out loud. No one will ever know. Okay. Amazon, I am congenitally customer focused. That's definitely not a public facing statement. But the one I like the most, and not because I'm a longtime Macintoshian, is design is how it works. It's just that simple, just like their packaging. So why should I care? Why should you care? To illustrate why this is important, even for those of us who are FileMaker developers, I invite you to try a brief exercise. So everyone has their paper and some writing instrument. Okay, this is meant to be very quick. And those of you who are remote, please join us in this exercise. This is meant to be very quick. So get your paper, pencil, pen ready. This will just be 20 seconds. Ready to start now. Everyone draw a tree with a swing. And that's time. All right. So everyone hold up your pictures that you drew. Wow, that's really nice. That's not bad either. Okay, so you don't have, yeah, so you've got the tree, the swing on the side of the tree.
They're like friends.
Okay, it's a little hard for me to see the ones in the back. I see Jordan's. Yours is a little light colored. Oh yeah, okay, I see. Well, not surprising, Bill. And Eric, what have you got there? I see. I see. It's very firm. Okay, very nice. All right. So those of you who are remote, do you have trees to show us? Very nice. Very nice. I can see it. It's nice. That's, trust me. All right. So now I'd like to share a related story related to your trees. So this is how the customer explained it. Okay. This is how the project leader understood it. This is how the engineer designed it. This is how the programmer wrote it. This is how the sales executive described it. This is how the project was documented.
Ooh.
This is what operations installed. This is how the customer was billed. This is how the help desk supported it. And this is what the customer really needed. Okay. So I'm sure that not a one of you can relate to this, either as a customer or as a developer. But it really explains humorously why UX is important. Because UX is about actually meeting the customer's needs, the end user's needs. And in order to do that, you have to interact with the person who knows what they need. Even if they don't know what they need, you have to interact with them enough to be able to figure out what it is they actually need, regardless of, again, of what they tell you they want or what they think they need. But again, remember, the customer explained it like a ladder swing. What they really needed was the tire swing. So they didn't explain it correctly either. So our job is to get it right and avoid all of that. All right. So I know you can relate, but you probably have questions like, how is UX different from UI? And aren't they the same thing? I'll tell you real quick. No, UX does not equal UI, but I didn't waste a slide on it here. UI is essentially the aesthetic layer of your solution, while UX covers the entire experience of using your solution. Okay. And how will it help you? What?
So
Yeah.
is that the UX would include the business process automation side of things, not just how it looks? Is that kind of?
It's not just how it looks. I'll leave it at that for the moment because we're going to get into that.
Okay.
I will answer that. And how it will help you to deliver the much needed tire swing instead of the poorly described ladder swing is what I'm going to explain next. All right. It starts with a 5-step iterative design thinking process. And don't worry, there won't be a test yet. Okay. We start with empathy or research is the first phase. They call it empathy because in order to understand what the user needs, you have to be able to empathize with the user. We'll talk about that a little more detail later. Phase 2 is planning or defining. Some of this probably doesn't sound too different from what you already do. Maybe. Third phase is ideating or design. I love the word ideating. Just really fun to say. Next is prototype. Now, you might have noticed that a little line drew after empathize because we do the empathizing in order to define the problem that we're going to plan for. After we do the prototype, we'll learn from that. That's going to spark new ideas. Because what I didn't mention that is different from how we usually do things is that every stage of this process, we're interacting with the user, not the admin high on the top floor level admin. We're interacting with people who know the answers, who can give us the right feedback. So we learned recently, for example, that one of the primary staff people at an office with, maybe 15 people in it that are going to be using our solution is dyslexic. And one of the issues that she has is that there's an area on one of the screens, there's one section of data where everything is always all caps. And that's very difficult for her to read. But that's just one person out of, she's 10% of the office. It may not seem like a really big deal, but it's such an easy thing to fix. And she will be so much happier when she can actually read and not have to take as long to do her job because of that. So we interact and interface with the customer throughout. And then finally, we get to the last phase, which is testing and evaluating. And of course, that creates new ideas for the project. It reveals insights that make us redefine, that allow us, provide opportunities to redefine and plan. And we learn more about the users when we have them test our solutions. So one of the things that I'm used to doing as a FileMaker developer is I test my work and I know it works, or I'm pretty sure it works. And sometimes even someone else in our office will test it and make sure it works. But what we don't know, when we are the only ones who test it, when developers are the only ones who test it, one, we have a bias. Like, we built it, and we only use it the way that we built it to work, right? We don't make mistakes. And we don't do it while standing on our heads in the kitchen with spilt strawberry juice all over the place, right? So we don't know what circumstances are going to be that's going to cause someone to do something and create a problem, create an error, make something fail. So we need users to actually test it, not just us. That's it, right? We just got to do those 5 things in that order, get feedback, and we've done UX, right? Now, if it were that easy, I would have spent 6 months learning about it. So most of you are probably following a similar sequence now. How many of you would say you follow something relatively along those lines? Okay, great. Okay. The shifts that you need to make to go from I kind of do it that way to I'm really doing it are what we're going to cover next. So to follow the process well, deliver the tire swings, you need to understand and follow the UX fundamentals. So we're going to cover a few things. We're going to cover some tools and techniques at the end. We're going to now go over the fundamentals, and we've already talked about the process. So there's a lot you're going to have to hear. Don't expect to remember all of it. That one went in when I was tired and I need a little animation, so bear with me. Okay, so the UX fundamentals. The first of these is empathy. In the context of UX design, it means understanding the pain and experience of the users. It could also be defined as an intellectual identification with the feelings, thoughts, and attitudes of the users. But if you don't want to get that touchy-feely, it's also been described as gaining a 360-degree understanding or reframing the problem, which you can do better after you understand the users and have empathy with them. And it's also been said that empathy leads to innovation, and I like that one. You get ideas when you listen to the users and pay attention. You may learn things about their environment that you're never going to get in a meeting in a conference room or on a Zoom call. The next fundamental is the UX hierarchy of needs. So as you can see, the obvious, everyone expects things to be functional. They want it to work as it's programmed. They also expect it to be reliable and available. They expect that it can be used without any difficulty. And those first 3 are the objective tasks. Those are at the product and feature level, right? Those are things that as developers, we tend to feel pretty confident that we got this covered, right? We're good. No problem, right? But there's more. They want it to be easy to use, and they want it to work the way they think it should use. So the I there is them talking, right? They want it to work the way they think it should work, not the way you think it should work. And that's where the you are not your user comes in. And when I first shared that with Steve and Matt, Steve said, I want that on posters all over the office, right? You are not your user. A memorable experience worth sharing. So many of the solutions that we build are for either a limited group of users, like who are they going to share it with, right? I think the point here is twofold. One, UX applies to web design as well as solution and product design. So the memorable experience worth sharing is probably wording I would use more for website design and things like that. But I think the same would apply to a solution that's used by more than one person. If they're happy with it, they're gonna share their experience with someone else. They may not write a tweet about it, which is fine because I don't tweet, right? But they're gonna have the same kind of reaction. And finally, that it has some meaning to them, that it has a personal experience for them. Now, obviously, we're doing business to business. So, or most of us are, I assume all of you are. So the personal significance may not be something that we as developers tend to think of as being important. But if we're designing something that improves the productivity or lessens the mental load on a user, then it's affecting them personally and it's improving their experience. And of course, the top three are subjective, which is where the UX comes in and why we need to focus on our users. All right. Next are the 5 planes of UX. So here we start with the first one is strategy. That covers our product objectives and user needs. We have to have those before we can do anything else at the conception of the product. Next is scope. There we're going to cover our functional specifications and content requirements. Because you can't go further without those, but it can't go those without having done the strategy, right? Next, we work on our skeleton. If I click the button, skeleton. No, sorry, I got them in reverse. Structure. Structure is your information architecture and your interaction design. So now we have the skeleton, which may look familiar to some of you. This is our information design, interface design, and navigation design. It's not the UI yet. It's the planning for it. It's not, so we haven't picked colors yet. We don't have gradients or shading. This is all the interaction design. This is how many buttons are there going to be? Are there going to be buttons? Are there going to be popovers? Are there going to be multiple layouts? Are we going to have different list views and detail views? Are we going to have lists that expand into detail views so it looks like they, those are the decisions that we're making at the skeleton level, not the UI. And then finally, the surface, which is pretty, hopefully pleasing and pleasant and simple. And while these are a lot of terms and stuff to remember, I think most of us are familiar with what I'm talking about here. All right. Yantu, you are not the user. This supports what's known as the false consensus effect, which refers to people's tendency to assume that others share their beliefs and will behave similarly in the given context. Okay.
Thank you for playing.
How many believe that one? All right, so I made a big note, made it big in pink because this is pink here. This will represent a mindset shift for some. Okay, so we basically need to plan on designing for the nerds like ourselves and the noobs. All right, next is VIM, which stands for Visual, Intellectual, Memory, and Motor, which account for 80% of usability issues. So reducing these in our designs should be a high priority, specifically when you want to reduce visual load, intellectual load. And did you know that the average person makes 35,000 decisions a day? Yeah. So let's not add anything unnecessary to their day. They already have a busy lot of stuff going on in that brain. All right. Reduce memory load, both short and long term when we can, and motor load, which includes inconsistencies in required behavior or expected behavior. So if they're moving to do something only to find that it's not doing what they thought, that's a problem, right? Rule of thumb for UX, more options, more problems. Next, affordances are cues which give a hint to how users can interact with an object. I'm sure you're familiar with most of these. Explicit affordance, the button says, click me. It can't get more obvious. Click me, do this. Run report, for example, in a button, right? Not run report in text on a white background that looks like a label. Not that we've ever seen anything like that ever. Never. Okay. Next is pattern affordance. Now this includes the use of button looking objects like this that suggest interaction. It also includes things like the common use of a logo in an upper left corner that when you click it, it takes you home. That's a pattern affordance because it's an accepted pattern. Next is hidden affordance. This would cover things like our popovers. So the user knows that when they see that little arrow or whatever the clue is that we've given them, that they can do something, that they can interact with that. Next are false affordances. Now these exist when something that appears actionable is not. You have a button that does nothing. You have something that, no, you do a solution that has sortable portals, right? So the portals use the virtual sort trick, and users can just click on the label and they sort until you give them one that doesn't. No one ever talks about using it. No one ever says thank you. So you forget, or another developer does something and they don't have those sortable portals, and then that's a false affordance. Someone thinks it's going to work, then they start to think bad things. They start to lose confidence, even over little things. They build up like sand in your shoes. Okay. So we want to avoid those. Another example of that might be using the same or too similar of an icon, say for expanding and collapsing a list view, as we use for go to related records from in a portal. If we use the same visual for something and it does two different things, we need to be very, very careful about that. Metaphorical affordances, that's, I think, pretty obvious. The only thing I would add about that is to be careful about icons. And I am one who loves, loves icons. I really kept it down here. The icons because of that. But I can go into a rabbit hole and spend hours looking at, noun project or something, but that's just me. But we have to be careful about using metaphors if they're not obvious. And I would say, unfortunately, in my opinion, there are some very widely accepted icons that mean certain things. The hamburger icon for your navigation menu, or your gear for settings, right? I use gear for options, not settings, right? So we need to be more aware of what users are expecting, and not, well, this is what it means here, right? In this solution, it means this, which means that we may have to sometimes adopt images that we might not have chosen to use. Our users need to be well aware of what the metaphors are. Next are negative affordances. These, of course, are things like disabled buttons. They're a great example of this would be conditional formatting that we use to create the disabled button state. And the last of the fundamentals that I'm going to share with you are Jacob Nielsen's 10 heuristics for UX design. This is Jacob Nielsen. So you're probably wondering, boy, I've never had a problem saying that word before now. What are heuristics, and who is Jacob Nielsen? So Dr. Nielsen is a user advocate and a principal of the Nielsen-Norman Group. You may not know who that is, but feel free to look them up. He established what's called the discount usability engineering movement for fast and cheap improvements of user interfaces, has invented several usability methods, including the heuristic evaluation we're going to talk about. And he holds 79 US patents, mostly on ways of making the internet easier to use. And he's got a lot of people who think he's pretty darn great.
What is heuristic?
That's what I'm going to explain now. So heuristics, and I had to look this up. But I mean, I know what the heuristics are, but what heuristic itself means is actually pretty interesting. Eric and I looked this up yesterday just in the dictionary, and we got a really brief, like vague, not helpful answer, right? As the dictionary will sometimes do. I looked again today and I chose the all tab and I got some really great information. So heuristics are strategies derived from previous experiences with similar problems. Why it had to be such a fancy word, I don't know, Greek and all. The most fundamental of these is trial and error, or rule of thumb, okay? An educated guess, those are heuristics. These are decisions that we make. We don't expect them to be 100% accurate all the time, but based on past experience, they're good enough, okay? The first of these for UX is visibility of system status. So the design should always keep users informed about what's going on through appropriate feedback within a reasonable amount of time. Match between system and the real world. The design should speak the user's language. Use words, phrases, and concepts that are familiar to the user, not jargon. Okay, certainly not internal jargon. Follow real world conventions, which is what I was talking about a moment ago, and make information appear in a natural and logical order. Users want to feel like they're in control, but they often perform actions by mistake. So we need to help them. We need to give them clearly marked emergency exits, things like that, like don't open a card without a way to get out of it, right? Anyone ever force quit? Maybe. You know, the one that scares me, the one that scares me is the on-timer scripting. I'm just always fearful that, because I put Windows off screen all the time, and I have this fear that if I start one, it will just never go away. Okay. We want them to feel like they have some control. Consistency and standards. Users should not have to wonder whether different words, situations, or actions mean the same thing. Follow platform and industry conventions. Error prevention. Good error messages are important, but the best designs carefully prevent problems in the first place from occurring. Either eliminate the error-prone conditions if you can, or check for them and present users with confirmation option before they commit to the action. So this isn't just talking about, are you sure you really want to delete this? These are a little more, I mean, I think we all kind of do that, but not returning unhelpful messages when they make a mistake. And I myself don't usually go this far, but I recently did something for a client where when they didn't get the right result, I gave them, I basically built a slider on a popover that had instructions on how to fix the problem, because it was like a 3 or 4 step fix that had to be done manually. And it doesn't happen often, but this is like the 4th time in 6 years that I had to fix it for them. So I built that in to the error message. That's the kind of thing they're talking about there. Next is recognition rather than recall. So minimize the user's memory load by making elements, actions, and options visible. The user should not have to remember information from one part of the interface to the other. So that kind of falls in with consistency as well. Consistency and context. And my personal mantra is that the answer is always context whenever something's wrong. In the real world or in FileMaker, it's usually context, like 98% of the time. Okay, so next, flexibility and efficiency of use. Shortcuts hidden from novice users can speed up the interaction for expert users, so your design can cater to both inexperienced and experienced users. So I don't know if any of you do this or if many of you do this, but allowing users to use a shift select on a button to do a slightly different thing than the masses do, or alt select. That kind of thing is part of what they're talking about there. Next is the aesthetic and minimalist design. So interfaces should not contain information that is irrelevant or rarely needed. And I think we've all heard this. Anyone who's been to DEF CON ever has heard that. Or if anyone has ever heard Albert Hiram Alvarez, it's basically, you know, you're done with the interface when there's nothing left to remove, right? Okay. Yes, yes. Yeah, remember that visual clutter, right? Not helpful for the user trying to use their work. In fact, an example that Eric shared with me yesterday had to do with a spreadsheet that we're going to be, clients using a big spreadsheet. And it's like one worksheet for every one of 20 different locations, right? And they're going to be going to FileMaker. But because it's a spreadsheet, there's all kinds of clutter, and there's lots of subtotals all over the place because the numbers over here get rolled into the numbers over here, and then that goes down to here. So there's like all these different subtotals, and we're thinking, you know, in the end solution, they probably really just want the total, right? They probably don't need all those different breakdowns like they have because it's clutter that they probably don't need. So declutter. 9, we're almost to the end here on this. Help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. So error message should be expressed in plain language, no error codes. Unless it comes with your phone number right after it. Right? Okay. Precisely indicate the problem and constructively suggest a solution, if at all possible. No, just try again. Personally, I like putting in the message. Now I can't remember what it's called. You've got the body and the message, the title of the error message. Anyway, on the title bar of the message, I always start with something like, oops. Like when I know that they screwed up, I say, oops, this didn't work. Give it just a little bit friendlier tone.
So suggesting how to carry is not an option.
No, probably not. And the last heuristic is help in documentation. So obviously it's best if like most of Apple's products, you don't need documentation. They don't even bother anymore. Right? Just great packaging. So it's great if you don't need it, but it may be necessary to provide documentation to help users understand how to complete their tasks, particularly when you're dealing with some more complex processes and things that have to be done that we're building for. But be sure you charge for that. I think I spoke almost 20 years ago at DevCon on documentation from my painful lessons of thinking that documenting how it works should have been part of what the work I did in what I quoted. And that's before I realized how long it takes to document. It can cost as much to document a large system as it did to build it almost, depending on what it is. So be sure to keep that in mind, as well as doing it for your end users, do it for yourself as well. Everybody's got all that, right? And we're all doing all this stuff. Okay, the reason that they're called the usability heuristics, it's not so much that these are UX rules that you have to follow. These are guidelines that are used to evaluate your own work before you give it to your client. Before you give it to the end user, we use these rules to check against those things because, as I said earlier, 80% of usability issues are related to the Vim, and a lot of this feeds into that overload of the Vim. And before we move on, I want to caution you about biases. So I did not know this before. There are over 180 cognitive biases. And all of us are human, so we all have at least some or most of them. Well, maybe not most, but we all have some of them. And some of them interfere with how we process data, think critically, and perceive reality. And a few of these in particular can really handicap our UX efforts. So you're probably already familiar with the first two of these, cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance. That one I've always had trouble saying, cognitive dissonance. So I'm not going to explain what those are. I'm going to focus on the next two. Curse of knowledge. That's actually a documented cognitive bias. Once you understand something, you presume it to be obvious to everyone.
Of course.
None of us as developers are guilty of that, are we? Okay, so this is what I found on this that I thought really explained it well. Things make sense once they make sense. So it can be hard to remember why they didn't. And it's hard to remember that our users haven't been through that same learning curve that we went through, which brings me back to you are not your user. And that includes your level of knowledge. When writing documentation or doing videos, the advice is pretend or assume that your audience is a 10-year-old. In a non-demeaning way, of course, right? But don't make any assumptions about what they know. And the next, my favorite, is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, when my instructor was explaining these in one of my courses, he got to this one and he said, and there may be someone in this class who is suffering from that. He never said who, but I had a really strong suspicion, I know. Okay, so as consultants, we can be particularly susceptible to this one. After all, our clients come to us because we are the experts, right? So we have to be very cautious about this and thinking that we know more than we do. And I'm not suggesting that we don't know our jobs, that we don't know FileMaker, and we don't know how to create solutions to problems, but we may not be as good at listening and understanding what it is we really need to be doing for our customers in our projects. Bertrand Russell said, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so certain of themselves, yet wiser people so full of doubts. Okay, now we'll get into the fun stuff. Following the UX design process that I outlined earlier. And congratulations for having survived this far. We've gone over the basic fundamentals behind human-centered design thinking. And by the way, I don't think I explained this earlier, but UX, design thinking, and human-centered design, all the same thing. They're basically all the same thing. Human-centered design is basically the philosophy behind design thinking, and design thinking is the process that's followed with UX. So they're basically all talking about the same thing, no matter which of those phrases you hear. There may be slight nuances, but they're basically the same. So I'm going to share with you some of the tools and techniques that are used to implement the 5-stage UX design process. And I'll be sharing or mentioning several things for each stage. And I intend to discuss more about some of these items than others. So when you see something bulleted that's bold, I'm going to talk a little more about that. If it's not bold, we're going to zoom through it because you're probably not doing it tomorrow. Okay. So empathy and user research. There are numerous tools to choose from, but basically this gets down to interviews and ethnographics. Does anyone here know what ethnographics are? Well, I actually called my mother on this one because she's an anthropologist. And I haven't heard her sound so gleeful in years. Oh, well, let me explain. So in anthropology, ethnographics involves going out to the village, living with the villagers, experience their experience. It's not exactly empathy, but it generates some empathy. And when you live among those that you are studying, you learn a lot more about them. So that's basically what ethnographics are. So the user interview is very essential. It's really at the core. That's why it was at the bottom strategy level of the 5 planes, because we can't know what it is we need to do until we understand what the user needs. We can proceed based on the RFQ that we got from whomever, but if we're not finding out from the user and at least confirming, at very least confirming with the user before we get too far, then we run the risk of going very far in the wrong direction. So interviews and ethnographics. Live among, experience, go out. I know this was difficult to do for the last couple of years to like go face to face and everybody was Zooming. But when you have an opportunity to actually go on site and see the conditions that people are working in, that's everything. About 9-10 years ago, I went to Zambia for a client because they were, you know, like in Zambia with hundreds of children showing up, and we built this solution that allowed them to like register the kids as they got in, take their pictures, do stuff in that. And, you know, like I thought I totally understood what they needed. I got this. I got a great thing we're building for you. Fortunately, the owner said, no, we really need you to go to Zambia because until you experience what they're working with, and what they're not working with, you just don't know. And that taught me a lot before I even knew what UX was or user interviews. So I learned a lot. All right, next, personas or personas, depending on how you pronounce it. It's all up for debate. Personas are basically non-specific characters, if you will. These are your users or your user types. So if you're building something for a very small office and there's 3 people, you don't even care much about personas. You've got 2 people, you know who they are. You know their personalities, you've interviewed them. You don't necessarily need personas. If you're working with a team, like we are here at Harmonic, where we've got design and documentation, designs this stuff, but then low code and app tech are going to actually do the code work. They don't know these users. They didn't interview them. So the personas help us to introduce them. So basically everyone's on the same page about who their user is, what their needs are, that type of thing. So if you're building a solution, for example, that needs to be used by different types of users. So you've got a banking application and you've got tellers who are going to use it, but then you also have managers who are going to use it. Well, they need to be able to do different things. And how many of you here have had to build a system where there's more than one privilege set, right? Those different privilege sets are different personas. They're different roles that have to use your system, because to build something that is based on what the user needs, you have to understand who the user is, what their requirements are. And it's also easier to understand if your solution was successful when we've taken the time to define what it is that we think success looks like for the people we're actually building it for. So who cares about this? I answer that with a question, which is, who is it you're building for? And I think I just, oh, did it skip ahead?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, here we go. Okay, I'll just explain them. Those were supposed to go in bullets, not show up all at one time. So anyway, so to the first one, who are you building for? The second one, what can they do with this thing? Next, how are they currently solving the problem? And lastly, how does your idea help them solve the problem quicker, smarter, or faster than your current practice? Empathy and affinity maps. Now this, when I first saw it, reminded me of like kindergarten play, like people are playing with Post-it notes in all different colors. And after actually doing this exercise, I actually went out and bought a whole bunch of different colored Post-it notes so that we could do it too. And that's when I learned how darn expensive Post-it notes are. I don't usually do the shopping at our house, so even for business things. So an empathy map is a collaborative tool that teams can use to gain a deeper insight into their customers. It covers says, thinks, does, feels for our persona. So one exercise that we did in class, and I'll just share it with you very quickly, was an experience that they actually showed us the image of a Lego Death Star. And kid got it for Christmas from God knows who, not mom. That's important. But the kid puts it all together, and then you know how it's got that like thing shooting out? There's like this beam, right? So it's got this little clear plastic Lego piece that goes in that end. That piece was missing. So mom has to call customer service, customer support, because this part doesn't exist anywhere. So what we had to do in teams was based on our user, our persona being mom in this situation. What did she do? What did she say? What did she think? And what did she feel? And just based on how we would have felt and trying to empathize with her position, and who can't empathize with, like, there's one piece missing. It's like the last piece of a puzzle missing, right? And you can't find it anywhere. And your kid is freaking out. So one of the things she's thinking is, I really hate the person that gave it to him. it was too expensive to give to a 10-year-old in the first place, right? She's also feeling things like overwhelmed, she's pissed off, she's just, what is she going to do? What's her plan B? So on and so forth. But what she says is different. When she gets on the phone with somebody, she's much more polite, trying to solve the problem. And so this exercise really helps with understanding the user's position. So we are going to move very quickly through the next few so that we can talk. There are also empathy and affinity maps. You take those things that you organize and then you group them by categories and such. We could do whole sessions on these things. These are just some of the tools that are used in UX. Lean Canvas for organizing different needs in different ways. It's very similar to the user-centered design canvas. And there's also a similar format that's used for businesses as well. It's just a way to help organize the knowledge that you have so that when the time comes for what you're building, you have this to refer to and you're not leaving out things. And there's about 100 other things that you can use with your user research. The one thing I would strongly recommend though, and you may have noticed there's a giant microphone on the view that I had the research. When you do your interviews with users, record it. Record it so that you don't have to write everything down because that interferes with your ability to be listening and paying attention. I know I'm a note taker, but it does get in the way. Also, there may be others that need to hear the same things, or you may need to go back to something. Again, we have the same issues with our mental load. All right. User stories for planning and defining. Once we know what we need, what our users need, we have user stories that look like this. They're very simple. As someone, I want something so that something else good, right? And here's my acceptance criteria. So one example of that is, as an account manager, I want a sales report of my account to be sent to my inbox daily so that I can monitor the sales progress of my customer portfolio. And these are the acceptance criteria. That's what the user wants. That's what the user needs. There's nothing technical about that. There's no, how am I going to make this happen? There's no, hey, I got this new FileMaker object. I got this new tool. I got this custom function somebody built that's going to be great. None of that. This is what the user needs. They don't care about what's under the hood. So that's a shift that we have to make in thinking about what the user needs this way. So by using user stories in this way, and here are a few other examples of them, and they're very short. And then for a larger project, you start collecting all the little user stories. And those turn into part of your deliverables, because your user stories, which are very short, have attached to them the acceptance criteria. And you might then also attach more documentation. Here are the fields we're going to need. Here are the relationships we're going to, here are the technical aspects we're going to need. But in the UX point of it, at that stage, we're not worried about how it's going to be built. And that's important. That's another big mindset shift for you, because we tend to be thinking about how are we going to make this happen. We're thinking about that when we walk in the door, or they walk in our door. That's what we're thinking about. And when we're thinking about how we're going to do it and not paying as close attention to what they actually need, we're missing opportunities that we didn't know we had. Okay, there's lots of different kinds of UX mapping that you're welcome to explore later, but we're running out of time. And for ideating, this is really important. I'm going to spend the last 2 minutes on this. How many of you sketch out things before you build them? So I have always done this just because that's kind of how I think. Like, I kind of have to see it sometimes, and I like that. And sometimes if something's really complicated or has a really complicated workflow, I want to make sure that the client is on the same page with what I'm doing. So I'll do little storyboards like that show you're going to click here and then you're going to get this pop over and show that. And I'll draw it out on graph paper. And I've done that for years. Turns out That's part of UX. And the reason for doing it in pencil, for those of you who use programs to draw things like this, because I do that too, the reason for it is real simple. It's because when you share it with the client, with the end user, they have a bias if it looks too good. If it looks too good, they're more likely to accept it, even if it's not what they really need. Because when they see something that looks good, they see money spent and they don't want to throw it away. They don't consciously think that, but they do that. So if we present them with, this is how it's going to work, with rare exception, they're going to accept that. They're going to understand. It's going to be simple. You're going to do this, then you're going to go there, then you go there. You can express that on a piece of paper, or you can do it in a program if you want. But for me, it's quicker to draw it out, and you'll get better feedback. Then you do wireframes. How many have ever done a mock-up, like created a mock-up right in FileMaker? Yeah, because FileMaker is so easy and so quick to do that. We need to be careful about that because we can be investing time actually coding before we know that we're even headed in the right direction. So doing a wireframe, again, that can be sketched, just a higher quality version with a little more detail, but you'll notice that these are all monochrome. That's intentional because it's very intentional that when the user looks at this, they know this is not the final product. This is not the end result. This is the concept. This is the plan. Is this good? Does this make sense? Okay. And then next, you can do storyboards as well. And the next phase is prototyping. So we've talked about wireframes, mock-ups, and prototypes. This is the difference. And visually, it's obvious. The mock-up looks a lot better, but again, there's no photo of the actual location. And in the prototype, that's not the actual location either, because you don't want them looking at it and saying, oh, well, that's not the picture we want. That's not, we don't want it from that direction. You don't want anything that's going to distract them from what you're looking for, which is feedback on how it works. What's the plan? So I have a prototype. This will take 20 seconds and then we're pretty much done. So this was an interactive prototype that I built as part of my coursework with my team. And I animated it here, but it's actually a link they can click, they can do it on their phone, they can actually play with it. And I used XD to do that. You can also use Figma and other things. Then usability testing, we could do 6 months on that. So I'm just showing you all those. And if you want to hear about them, I'm happy to talk about them another time. I went 32 seconds over. So close. Okay, this is the difference between UI and UX. Okay, that's all I got. That's 6 months worth of class that I've just downloaded a portion of to you. It was very hard to choose what to share. And I hope that I hit the right points. Thank you. Any questions?
So we have a burger bar set up and plates and everything. Please help yourself, come join us for some good lunch conversation.